Okay, I'm going to declare a quorum for the City of Groton, for the joint City of Groton and Town of Groton, the Special Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019.
Thank you, Mayor Hedrick. All councilors, with the exception of Councilor Atwater and Councilor Aubrey, are present this evening.
And all councilors for the City of Groton are present. So the first thing on the agenda is the public hearing for the tax increment financing Thames Street Five Corners Master Plan. It is a joint public hearing. And Sierra, if you could lead us in that presentation.
I have to read the notice of.
Oh, I'm sorry. Clerk, please read the notice.
Public hearing notice for the City of Groton on September 3rd, 2019. The City of Groton City Council will hold a public hearing for the establishment of a joint city-town tax increment financing TIF district and the adoption of a City-Town of Groton joint tax increment financing TIF district master plan on September 3rd, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. City Council Chambers, 295 Meridian Street, Groton, Connecticut, to review and discuss the following. The establishment of a joint city-town tax increment financing district and the adoption of the resolution authorizing the creation of the City and Town of Groton joint tax increment financing TIF district master plan for the district. The proposed TIF district includes 117.4 acres located along both sides of Paquonic Road from the vicinity of the Clarence B. Sharp Highway overpass continuing west to Eastern Point Road and north along Thames Street and Bridge Street. It consists of various zoning districts, including the Five Corners, waterfront business residence, and general commercial, and is more specifically depicted in the proposed City and Town of Groton joint tax increment financing TIF district master plan. All interested persons may be heard, and written communications may be received at the public hearing. Copies of the resolution and the City and Town of Groton joint tax increment financing TIF district master plan are available for public inspection during normal business hours at the town clerk's office, in the city municipal building, city clerk's office, and on the City of Groton website, www.cityofgroton.com. Dated at Groton, Connecticut, this 19th day of August 2019. Keith Hedrick, Mayor. The Town of Groton also publicly published the same public hearing notice on August 22nd.
Thank you. Is that sufficient, or do we need to read the town resolution into the record as well?
I don't think we need to read both. I think they were exactly the same. So
I noticed the clerk was here, and I wasn't sure if that was why she was here.
she was here, and then I told her that I was going to read it. So
Very good.
I told her she could go
Thank
if
you.
she wished.
And we have Mr. Reiner here as well to work with Ms. Patrick.
Okay, Sierra?
Well, good evening. My name is Sierra Patrick. I'm the city's economic development specialist, and John Reiner is accompanying me to discuss the joint city and town master TIF district. We have two actions that we are considering today, which is the establishment of the TIF district boundaries, also the adoption of the TIF of the district master plan. And at this time, I do. At this time, I would like to point out that the property tax baseline is based off of the October 2018 grand list. And at this point in time, upon approval of this district, it will become effective September 30th of this year. So, just to give a little brief overview of what tipped tax increment financing is, it is a financing method used to catalyze economic development. It leverages the increased assessment above the baseline, in our case that's 50%, to be dedicated to support infrastructure, projects, and programs related to economic development. And it is important to note that it is not a new tax. A few highlights: the town adopted a TIF policy in March of 2018. The city mirrored that policy and adopted the city policy in September of 2018.
The TIF policy outlines the district master plan requirements. It also discusses the credit enhancement agreement, which we will talk about further later on in this presentation, and it also gives procedures and reporting procedures for reporting and revising the TIF.
So I just wanted to give a very brief overview of the Route 1 district plan that was adopted just last month, actually fully implemented in August. Again, the 50% recapture, it's just a little over 145 acres, and consistent with the policy both for the town and the city, we're looking at a 30-year TIF. And in the town, any funding requirements for projects require approval of both the town council and the RTM. And again, just some of the general guidance and implementation of what we're looking for. These are guidelines that are within the TIF master plans themselves. And if you look at both the city master plan as well as the town, we're looking for a lot of these same types of qualities. How can we improve the quality of life, sense of place, and get reinvestment back into these critical districts?
Okay, so back to the joint TIF master plan. As you will see, our boundaries are highlighted in black. They encompass the Bridge Street area, Thames Street, and comes down to the Five Corner area, and includes some of Colonel Ledger as well. It is approximately 117 acres. It is based upon the downtown TIF as discussed, and we will get into a little bit more of the 50% revenue that's captured into the fund, and the use of funds would both require approval of the city and the town councils. So just for the vision for the district is one of a vibrant mixed-use village setting that includes offices, restaurants, retail, public gathering spaces, and innovative businesses with a focus of commercial on the ground floor and residential on the upper stories when building is facing the street. The village setting shall be consistent with the intent of the City of Groton zoning regulations as amended, with a focus on public waterfront views and access. The district shall be a destination for residents, visitors, tourists, employees, and the educational community. Some of our goals are to grow and diversify the tax base, to grow and support employment, to capitalize upon the nearby employers, and to improve the quality of life and place by encouraging revitalization, improving our infrastructure, maybe creating some housing opportunities, establishing public spaces, and improve our water-dependent uses, access, and recreation. Some possible projects that will be funded are infrastructure improvements, business support such as a facade program, beautification of public spaces and the associated maintenance, studies and consultant services, and any remediation and property acquisitions. So we also can fund with the fund, we can assist private development, and our preferred method is through the credit enhancement agreement. CEAs will only be for projects that cannot occur without the financial assistance, and those terms will be negotiated. We will also negotiate on a case-by-case basis TIF-backed debt fund for public and private projects, fixed assessment agreements, and tax abatements. Charles, is there anything you want to add to that? Okay. So for the mechanics, 50% of the district's increment above the October 2018 grand list will go into the district fund. The other 50% will go into the general fund along with the 100% of the baseline. The term for the district is for 30 years, and any expenditures and revisions will require approval from both city and town council. Other supporting initiatives that are going on in the city, the 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development was adopted in January. The Thames River Promenade Plan was just recently completed with Integrate Partners, and the Planning and Economic Department is currently working on initiating a new zoning tool using floating zones and actually looking at amending our parking and multifamily regulations. We are also establishing a resiliency workshop, and our Economic Development Commission is actively working on an initiative called Welcome to the City that looks at that is studying our gateways. Any questions?
Council?
I just want to remind everybody, please use a microphone. That way it's captured for the video recording. No questions?
Any questions from,
Counselor Franco?
So the plan has to go through the town council to get approval, but when development actually comes through, that's basically for the city to decide. It will not have to come through the town, is that correct?
Our taxes. Because it's in the town also, it's in our town, it's in the town also, so it'd be the city for the city taxes and the town for the town taxes.
Yeah. So the development approvals through planning, zoning, that will all go through the typical city process, but anything that's dealing with TIF and the credit enhancement, that will be going through both the city and the town.
anyone else? Any other council? Open it.
Certainly.
Okay, I will now open it up to citizens' comment. This is the portion of the council meeting where the council welcomes comments from citizens. To address the council, please sign a sheet on the table at the front of the meeting room. When you're recognized, please approach the podium. Clearly state your name and address and speak into the microphone. Each presentation should be limited to 5 minutes or less, and citizens should, if possible, submit email or written statements. Presentations should be related to matters pertinent to the tax increment financing on Thames Street Five Corners Master Plan. And councilors will only ask questions in order to clarify the speaker's presentation. And that's it. Do we have anybody who would like to, from the audience, who would like to speak regarding the tax increment financing of Thames Street Five Corners Master Plan?
Which microphone? Oh, over here, okay.
Does that work?
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Portia Bordelon, 159 Shinnecossett Parkway. I just wanted to speak and say how excited I am about the TIF coming to the city side. As we talk about all of the employment coming in through the city, through EB, and a lot of young people coming in, looking at jobs and such, it will be nice to see the improvements made so that it's the gateway, because that is the area of the town that everybody sees when they come in, and to see a thriving TIF district that's going to have the things that were discussed in the presentation will attract younger generations that might decide to reside here in Groton. So I think it's great. I look forward to seeing it in full development. I'm full support of it, and I'm happy to see that it's on the table. And I look forward to seeing how we can fully use that water side of Groton property that is, I feel, an asset to all of Groton, and it is currently somewhat underutilized, and it'd be wonderful to have these things available to the public to tap into to make improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience who would like to speak? Is there anyone else from the audience who would like to speak? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing portion of this meeting. Thank you. We will move on to new business, which is the Groton Public Schools 2020 Building Program Update. And Mayor Granatowski.
Thank you, Mayor Hedrick. I just wanted to note that Dr. Grenier and members of the Board of Education cannot be with us this evening. They are in a contract negotiation strategy session, so they apologize for not being able to be here. But we have members of the Permanent School Building Committee, and we have Mr. Butkus from Arcadis. Mr. LaFrance is here, and they will be walking us through the building program update. Gentlemen, if you could just please remember to use the microphone. I'm sure everyone's very eager to hear all about this. Thank you for coming out.
Well, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Austin LaFrance. I am the chair of the Permanent School Building Committee, and I'm very, very excited to have a chance to give you guys an update on where we are with the schools. It's been a really, really fast trip. I can tell you that much. I'm going to introduce Jack Butkus from Arcadis. who's going to run you through this, but I thought I'd run very quickly on a program level of where we are, where we've been, and how we're going to get to where we're going. So on the top line here, you see the new middle school. The blue section is a period of design and approvals. The orange section is bidding and awards for the construction project. The green is the construction. You'll see where the arrow says today. It's midway through construction. As some of you know, we had the topping off ceremony with the last piece of steel put up the other day. It's amazing to watch that steel go up. It went from like nothing a month and a half ago to, it's actually a school now. You have the yellow section here that's showing you the move-in. The school will be occupied for the fall of next year, which I think is amazing. The guys are working 6 days a week. And that's what we can tell you on the schedule on that. Cutler and Westside is a little more complicated. It's actually 4 construction projects rather than 2, because simultaneous with new construction, we're going to have abatement and demolition of the 2 existing schools. We've already done some work. You'll notice 2 little summer work spots. Because of the way the state does their money, you have to break ground within a certain time that the money has been given to you. So those of you who are over at Cutler will notice that there's been a sort of a ditch that was dug and a whole new sewer line was run in. Those of you who've been at Westside will notice that the old oil tank is gone. And so those were the 2 pieces of construction that broke ground for the 2 schools. We're putting together the final approvals at the moment for both schools, and we'll go out for bidding and awarding of contracts hopefully by the end of November into December, and decisions on who's going to be doing steel, cement, site work, and those types of things will be made early in the first of the year. And then, as you can see, we're going to be occupying both of those schools in the fall of 2021. So it's going to be fun to watch, because it's going to look like mushrooms shooting up of places. So I'm going to turn this over to Jack. Jack Butkus is basically the man that sits on top of everything and tells us what's happening. And so he can give you the up-to-date on what's going on with all 3 of the construction projects. Jack?
Thanks, Bob. As Bob mentioned, the work at Cutler and Westside will have concurrent projects. And one thing that will also be concurrent in this little pink box at the start of the construction of the new building is a short period of overlap between use of the existing schools and activity for construction on the new building. That'll occur in the approximate April to June time period next year. We're going to start at the far end away from the current building on each of them and work progressively towards the building. When it comes to the site plans, I'll give you a little more detail on how we're going to proceed with that construction. But the original timeline discussed in the 2020 program, when it was put forward to the town, had talked about renovating those buildings. As you know, we went through another referendum in order to get approval to build new, which was our determination after discussions with the state and reviewing of the estimates. If we were still renovations, we would have to wait till everything was transferred over to the new middle school, and then begin the abatement, selective demolition, gutting the buildings and converting them to elementary use. Since we're building new, we can actually skip that process forward and begin in the spring working while we're still occupied for that short time, and then work in parallel, because the area of the existing buildings will become developed as new site work. Next. Starting with Cutler School, as you know, the original existing building is in this portion of the site. We'll start working in the ball field area to locate the new building. As you'll see as we get into some of the other illustrations, the buildings will be very similar in organization, where we have a multi-story academic tower, the administrative core, and then all of what the architects call the big box spaces, the cafeteria, the media center, and the gymnasium spaces. Where Cutler is concerned, we're entering about midpoint of the site for our main entrance into the property, which will bring us into the bus loop Students will enter at this area of the building near the academic office. That'll also be the main visitor entrance to the school, where we'll have a security checkpoint at the front office area before anyone passes into other areas of the school. The way the plans are broken up, the more public areas are concentrated, and then the academic areas are in a separate wing, which can be secured at night for segregating those academic spaces away from public traffic. Specific to Cutler, as I mentioned, we have the bus loop. We'll have some visitor parking in this island in the center. And then the buses will pass back out onto Fishtown. Parent drop-off traffic will enter a separate entrance here and loop through. We have this long drive which will allow curbside drop-off, and perhaps even more logistically challenging is afternoon pickup, where parents will be able to queue. Our goal is to get basically everybody off the road that we possibly can in order to queue up there. There's also a separate parking area here for the pre-K and K parking, where parents walk their children into the schools and they're accepted by the teachers. So they'll be able to approach this way through the walk here, and there will be a minor entrance here that will be used just for that pre-K population. Everyone else will be required to enter at the main area. So your parent drop-off and your pre-K traffic will come here. As far as the site development is concerned, as you see, we're using pretty much every inch of the space. We were given an accommodation by the wetlands folks that any area, this dotted red line here is the 100-foot upland review area for the wetlands. We were given an accommodation that as long as we didn't expand the cleared portion of the site beyond what was already cleared, that we could do development such as the playscapes and such within, and the ball fields, within that 100-foot protected area. So we've respected that existing clearing limit line, and as such, we have what you see for available area for development. We do actually have more developed area as far as hardscape than the existing building, and although that might sound like it's not ideal, it's actually functionally very good in that we're able to separate the bus and the parent traffic and have them use two separate intersections to the main road, so we can keep those traffic flows as separated as possible and can keep them safe. Next. As I mentioned, the big box spaces are located in the wing closest to the street. Boiler and back of house spaces, music areas, gym, dining or dining room or cafeteria with a performance area. This will be an at floor level performance area. We're not putting in a raised platform, which will add more flexibility to the area instead of building a stage. That's the same technique that we employed at the middle school. So if they need a raised area, they can do that with platform risers. But for accessibility interests and for flexibility of use, if they need overflow for classroom space, it's all at one level. And then the kitchen and service area off to the side. The media center in both cases is central to the building. A wider circulation space called the Commons is provided with a little gathering bench. The main office and administrative nurses suite will be here right at the entrance. A visitor comes to the building, they'll first get buzzed into this vestibule. These doors will continue to be locked. They come in and sign in at the office and then are allowed passage into the building itself. At Cutler, we have essentially flat site, so you'll have an academic wing that is and appears three stories, but we're locating that as far from the street as possible, so it'll be less imposing to the neighborhood. First grade, pre-K, and kindergarten will be on this ground floor level, and then we proceed upstairs to two more academic floors. To give a bird's eye view, looking from basically from the parking bus loop area at the building, you can see the massing of the big box spaces is large, but still not as large as if we had put the academic 3-story at the street. So our setbacks are at or beyond the minimums required by zoning, and we're trying to keep the highest portions as far away as possible. There are roof areas that have the potential for solar installations, and that's being researched on all 3 schools. And then any mechanical equipment on the roof that could be visible from the street will be provided with screening. Next. Here's a look from the opposite corner from the service area as you come around the curve on Fishtown. And you can see that there's not an official courtyard, but there is daylight between the wings so that these classroom spaces will have full access to daylight. Next. At Westside, we have a existing building that is not only in this area of the site, but actually approaches and nearly touches this wing of the new building. So our plan for construction here will be to start on the academic building and put in the foundations and begin raising the steel here first, and then come back through the public wing and work this way. And our expectation is that we will be out of the school season by the time we get to constructing the office block. Another obvious question will be, well, what do we do about parking? Because this is now, there's some parking in the front of Westside, but there's also a large lot in this area. The construction manager, O&G Industries, has worked out a logistics plan that says for those early stages when we're doing predominantly work back here, there will be a small reduction in teacher parking of, I believe, something in the neighborhood of 14 to 16 spaces. Depending on how the winter weather treats us and how early our spring actually comes to Groton next year, we'll see how much progress we can make until school is out. There's another potential increment to take another slug of that parking and occupy it for construction activities. In the event that that is required, there is a memorandum of understanding being reviewed by the attorneys right now between the town and Pfizer to use their visitors lot as overflow parking. And if that becomes necessary, then there will be a shuttle bus that runs back and forth for staff purposes. We would still keep visitor traffic on site. Again, in the interest of safety and circulation, we've created 2 separate entry points for parents and buses. The only dual use here is that during drop-off, pre-K and kindergarten parents will drive around to the back, and there's a separate lot similar to Cutler, a dedicated lot for them to park and walk their students into the academic wing. So those will be the only cars that need to drive through that loop, which is the same entry that the buses will use, entry and exit point. For parent drop-off, under typical circumstances, the cars will enter this drive, loop through, and then exit the drive that is also used as our service entrance. Small area of visitor or handicap parking closest to the building here, and then during the day, visitor parking will be part of this main lot. For events at night, in both cases, since these drop-off spaces are sized and the driveway is proportioned such that traffic can still pass by, those will double as visitor spaces for evening activities in both schools' cases. And potentially, to the extent the fire marshal's comfortable with it, we may be able to use some of the bus loop for overflow parking for events as well. Here we'll have some hardscape areas for paved play and a basketball court. We also have 3 playscapes similar to Cutler for different grade ranges, and the pre-KK area will be just outside the door from that lower level. As you're aware, we have a significant grade change from street level to playing field level. That will cause the academic building to seem much shorter than it really is. In fact, there's about a 6-foot change between the roadway here and the driveway right at the building. So even the big box spaces will be reduced in height effectively because of the slope of the land. By flattening things out in order to build, we've got a considerable amount of earth to move, and it's been calculated that it's obviously more effective if we can move the soil on site rather than carting it away. So we will be depositing that soil here in the field area, bringing that elevation up, which will effectively reduce the distance vertically that you travel from this area down to the fields, which is beneficial for our handicap circulation, et cetera. So we're saving money and making it more convenient at the same time. The only area of new clearing that will happen on this site is in the area here. This dotted line that you see curving around is our 200-foot upland review from the wetland area. And we have just a detention pond to take our stormwater that will be intruding into that wooded area. Might be a little trimming along the edges, but generally speaking, we're respecting the existing boundaries to the greatest extent. Similar in floor plan layout, we have the administrative block rather. We also have a health clinic in this area, and our faculty dining is located in this block. So this area is a little larger in square footage than what we saw at Cutler. Similar idea of visitor entry, come into a locked vestibule, come in, sign in at the office, and then be given access into the building proper. The big box spaces, art and music on the first floor here, media center central, with again that commons and multi-use seating area, circulation area here. Due to the grade ranges and the need to have certain age students at grade, some of those students, the first graders, will have, since we effectively have 2 grade levels, one at the field level, one at the main entry level, we can accommodate the need for an at-grade exit through here with obviously stairs, emergency escapes at both ends. Again, we'll have one level below this, which is the pre-K and some support space, and then up on the topmost layer of the academic building, the grades above second grade, so 3rd, 4th, and 5th will all be concentrated upstairs. There are special ed and tutor spaces and other resources that are interspersed within all 3 of the academic levels in order to reduce student circulation to get back and forth to their support services. Here you'll see this doesn't really depict the grade changes as effectively as we might like to illustrate now, but you can see that this level of classrooms is below the office and entry level, and therefore, giving the appearance from the street of only a 2-story building. Again, mechanical equipment nestled behind the big box spaces to the extent we can, and screening them from the street with rooftop screening. And then there are still areas on these roofs here that could be used for solar installations. Yes, Bob.
I'd like to stress that the designs were developed with the architects keeping in mind that people actually have to teach in these schools. So there were an awful lot of administrators, teachers, and special ed people and whatnot who sat and put together all of the square footage, figured out what they were going to need and how all the adjacencies were going to work together. So this wasn't designed just by a bunch of architects. There are an awful lot of people who are going to be in these schools who have had a direct hand in defining how they're going to work.
Here's a view coming from the field area. You see the lower entry, the pre-K and K entry is below. This is actually more of a bridge than a corridor as the grade drops down and exposes that lower level. And what you don't see off the page is the dedicated parking area for that drop-off function. But again, similar to what we saw at Cutler, the 3 stories married to the high 1-story spaces that'll be closer to the street. Here are some images that are similar for both, though not the same, but it would be kind of redundant to show you almost identical versions of each. The architects are looking at a variety of exterior finishes to include brick, some composite materials that would give again, a smoother texture, and some metal panel of some sort. We do have that type of mix of materials on the middle school to change up the palette and add some interest to the building. Color schemes and whatnot are still being researched with the building committee, so this is all considered tentative. But there will be something as a variety of spaces. And as you see from the academic or from the administrative area, it's a 1-story space, as is the cafeteria and gym, but the scales are such we don't need the space for the academics. So again, try to step that scale of the building down to make it more human scale at the point of entrance. This is a typical main lobby, commons area. There will be some display areas provided. There will be a bench for gathering. This is across the hallway from the gymnasium. Here, the media center will be just down the hall from the main entrance, and these window walls here will represent the main office, and this is at Westside, the exit that gets you down off to those playscapes that are at parking lot level.
What is that ceiling?
Ceiling, instead of a flat acoustical ceiling, it's open to the structure, but there are acoustical baffles that are hung, which will add some visual excitement to the ceiling without just being a sea of flat tile. But it will have acoustical properties. A similar type of material being used in the media center, different types of lighting. And last week at a special building committee meeting, the architects did begin discussing the palette of materials and themes as far as colors that will differentiate the schools. They, as you saw on the floor plans, they are not identical. But they're equitable, and we'll try to keep similar qualities of materials, breaking up the color schemes and the approaches so that each school has its own identity. Next. One large area that will have the flatter ceiling is the cafeteria area. This is looking from the corner. There is that non-stage performance area that will be off to one side, so it really functions as a cafetorium. There will be chair and table storage off to the side so that the eating tables can be removed in order to allow an assembly or a performance to happen there. And with a flatter ceiling that's, as you can see here, held off the walls to kind of float in the middle of the room, and an acoustic baffle at the rear near the servery, the architects are paying attention to the acoustics in that space to make it not only appropriate for cafeteria use, but to tailor the acoustics such that it will serve for a performance space. And a typical classroom will have a primary teaching wall with a interactive display board, whiteboards either side, and there'll be some mix of additional whiteboards and tackboards throughout the room. Each room will have some millwork, a sink and bubbler within the classrooms, especially on the lower grade ranges, and have direct and indirect lighting, so it gives you a softer, more even glow across the room. Next steps for the elementary schools are to complete the regulatory process through the various town agencies. We're putting the last touches, the architects are putting the last touches on the planning and zoning presentations. We're looking to finish the construction documents and estimates by November and go to the state for our permission to go out to bid by December. And the bidding process will happen from December forward with the interest of having an April start, weather permitting. And here's a comparison of the two schools, Westside versus Cutler. You can see many of the same types of spaces grouped in similar fashions. They are not directly mirror images of each other, but you can see that they are striving towards as much similarity from a functional standpoint as the sites would permit us to do. Are there any questions on the elementary school? Sir.
Could you go back to the illustration that shows the ground?
Counselor Zeperi, can you see if that is on, please?
The light's on. The light is on.
It's red.
Try this one.
Lights on, but no
Read
results.
Correct.
They said that about me for a long time.
We have Counselor Zeperi and then Counselor Franco wish to speak.
The ground site where you show the three buildings and the classroom building is at a lower level, and there's a bridge going across. Well, there's another one. The one thing I'm concerned about is that school building on the lowest land level of the site. I'm concerned about surface water. Will it all accumulate? Is that building going to be actually a lake?
The grade actually continues down towards the fields, and then past the fields goes down the hill into the wetland.
Okay,
So we are partly down the hill.
Okay, good. I thought you had told us that you were raising the fields the level of the field so it would be easier for people to get?
Yes, there is still a fairly significant grade change from this level down to the field, but now it's 4 foot less than it was before by the time we take all our fill from this area and deposit it here.
Good. Okay, I didn't think it's something that you hadn't.
Councilor Ortiz.
Hi, I have two questions. The slide with the classroom, where are the
Yes.
windows?
Actually, the camera is in the window in this orientation.
Every classroom has both direct and indirect lighting, and if you look at the way the buildings have been stacked and organized, they've been designed specifically so that they will be able to get light through to all of, even the ones at the bottom of the pre-K classrooms will have.
Oh, go back one more. There we go. So this portion of the lower level at Westside is our support space, our boiler room, et cetera, down here where it's hidden by the hill. And then as we get towards the more open area of this court between the wings, the grade drops sufficiently enough so that all the classrooms have daylight.
Special ed rooms, classrooms,
Mhm.
are you going to build, to cater to the special ed
Yes,
physically and?
The two schools have slightly different programs for special ed. They're of different names and different functions, but the space allocation is very similar as far as square footage. The academy spaces here at Westside support that special ed plus special ed resource areas. This is just showing on one floor, but there are other resources scattered throughout the building.
So this was one of the things that was very carefully looked at, and the special ed, the folks who actually are teaching and working with these students understood that they had some input, and they let us know how much space they needed for the folks that they had, what kind of uses needed to be adjacent to each other. So you'll see there's the OT-PT space here that opens up into a commons. And Jack can go further.
And then tutoring spaces, again, the special ed resource rooms. And again, this is just represented one floor of Westside. There are other distributions of special resource areas throughout the academic wings on both projects.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Franco.
I have a lot of questions. Is this on?
Mhm.
Okay. So how many children will be in each school?
That's
The-
up to the Board of Ed.
The
What does that
design,
hold?
the design capacity as requested when the town sought the grants was 604 students per building.
And is there room for expansion if needed to build on, if there was a big boom?
There is room within the existing allocation of classrooms to accept more students in the existing footprint. And yes, given the constraints of the site, the possibilities for throwing an addition on have been discussed, although it would be configuration-wise, it would be a little difficult because of our constraints with the wetlands and the setback lines, et cetera. So there's a potential, but I can't say that we're going to add a dozen classrooms to each.
And that's on both buildings?
Yes, both. We've discussed that with the architects on both buildings. I can't say that we have a clear, put them here footprint determined, but we know that within the number of teaching spaces that we have, and by allocating those teaching spaces and perhaps adjusting the number of students per class, that there is an opportunity to absorb a certain percentage of growth even within the existing footprint.
Okay. So these are renderings. How locked in are they? How locked in are these designs?
The floor plans are essentially set. We are now in the process of creating construction documents. We've gone through schematic design and design development. Those have been accepted by the building committee and reviewed by the board. It does conform with the ed specs and has received everyone's approval so that we can proceed into the construction documents phase, which, as we noted, will wrap up this fall, but I believe the deadline is the 9th. Next week is our 50% point for checking the construction documents and sending it out to the estimators again. So CDs are just about halfway done at this point with a goal of wrapping up by November.
So our town is unique when it comes to athletics. The Parks and Rec and the schools share a lot of the fields and athletic
Resources.
choices there. So I was looking at Cutler, and can we go back to the Cutler layout? So can you tell me what the outdoor athletic areas are?
We have paved play. We have 3 age-appropriate playscapes that are located on the site, a multi-purpose field, and a baseball field that would be provided at Cutler.
Is there a basketball court?
There is not at this time, no.
So previously at Cutler, there were 6 areas. There was a tennis court, a basketball court, a general field, a soccer field, a softball field, and a baseball field. So those were 6 areas for athletics. And what I'm seeing on here, basically, it's coming down to about 3 areas. And I'm wondering, why are we losing so much? And then there's no ability to even expand the school if there's growth.
The projects are elementary schools, which have a much different program than the middle schools that have till now occupied the sites. So with research, the middle schools did not have things such as the paved play and the playscapes, which you can see chew up a fairly measurable square footage on site. We also have the balance with the state grant and the granting agency that is looking at, well, what does an elementary school need? What does the ed spec request as far as features to support the elementary school? And beyond that, features, if we could fit them, would not be eligible for state reimbursement. Due to the fact that we did not have separate traffic patterns for buses and parents and as I discussed earlier, we are actually creating more roadway surface in these layouts than we had previously, but it's being done for a programmatic function, which is to separate those traffic patterns. So that takes precedent in what, again, what are the features required to support an elementary function, and those became priorities. So if there was square footage available for something beyond what an elementary school decides, or requires, I should say, then those would be features that we essentially have to come back to the council and say, can we spend money on features that are outside of the ed spec, that are not education specific? So that was what has been driving each of these designs. At Westside, there was room on that upper plateau once we create the parking area, and then there's retaining walls that separate the site to that back roadway that goes down to the lowest classroom level. There was space on that plateau for a basketball court, so one is being replaced there. But again, that was a convenience factor rather than something that was a driving requirement of the educational program.
I understand, and even as for an elementary school, I'm sure they're not playing baseball on a full-size baseball field either. So, I mean, that...
But this will be a full-size field.
Right, but I'm sure elementary children do not play baseball on a full-size baseball field, but that's on there. That's what I'm not understanding.
That was a feature that we were able to replicate without impacting the elementary educational program. So again, we've charged the architects and the site designers to give us what we can to replace what was already there without going through extraordinary measures. Rick Norris has also met with the recreation folks and compared, done a checklist. The town today has these features that correspond with these 3 sites, the new middle school as well as these 2, what will become elementary schools, and has reviewed the features. For example, at Cutler there was a softball field. There will no longer be a softball field, but we're creating a new softball field because we were able to work within the site at the middle school for them to have one, which is again a feature that's more appropriate to accommodate uses at a middle school grade level than would be driven by an elementary school. So we're not trying to put excess program into these sites where we can replicate it elsewhere within the program. but trying to provide as many features as these sites will accept.
Right, and in my mind, I would expect going from 2 properties to 3 properties that we would possibly have a net gain, and we're not, and that's my concern.
Again, our programs between middle and elementary are very different, and the circulation and traffic separation are significant reasons for that.
So there's a lot more pavement here, which will also be a lot more maintenance of that pavement as well.
Again,
Is that correct?
it's programmatically driven. It's not.
If you look at Cutler right now, you have an issue of.
Mr. LaFrance, could you use the microphone, please? Thank you.
If you look at both Cutler and Westside now, those designs were back in the, early 50s, as far as traffic flow and whatnot. And you know as well as I do that they're horror shows as far as getting people in, people out, and whatnot. What we were trying to do with the site was to utilize the site as effectively as we could to make that, stop that problem and make it as safe as possible for the children and the parents to actually access the area and come to school, so that it's not a frightening place to try to cross the parking lot to get into the school. What we've done is to maximize the parking space. There are 100 parking spaces here now, so that for things like after-school events and whatnot, we can get some people in, where you can't do that right now with what's there. It is a compromise, there's no question. And what we've done here is to utilize the space that we had in the best way we could to create a baseball field and a multi-purpose field that both the town rec departments could use outside of the elementary school functions. And you'll see when we go to the middle school that we've added several fields to that. So the end result is a much more usable bunch of spaces than what we have at the moment, I believe.
Just simply because if I compare this to the west side, I mean, you just have it where like parents could just drive up off the street, pull up, drop off, and then go back out onto the street. I mean, is that not something that we could do on the bottom right-hand corner instead of having a road that goes all the way towards the back of the school and spins around? And
due to the proximity to the curve in the road, we've had to push even the service entrance further down, just from a traffic management standpoint, sight lines for entering and exiting. So to have put a heavily used like parent drop-off lane in the front here would have been a traffic safety issue. But those were all researched early in the design process.
well, maybe it's just coming here at a late date that nothing can be changed, and you're sort of stuck with what the rendering is now, but maybe the school could have went on the other side, all the way to the other side.
Can't do that if we're building before the school ends.
Oh, that's right.
That's,
I'm
you know,
sorry.
that has driven, even though it provides us the advantage of completing the program a year ahead of schedule and saving the cost escalation of a year and allowing the redistricting plan to happen a year in advance and reap those savings, reap those savings for the town. That has been a design constraint, surely.
Also, inside the gymnasiums, is there room for parents to sit in chairs around the edges, or is there grandstands?
There are no grandstands. There is some limited perimeter area for seating, but these are not competition venues. These are elementary school gyms that were actually sized at the middle school size. So we've actually upsized them and prioritized square footage into them to make them larger than typically would be programmed into an elementary.
So the 2 previously new elementary schools, I believe it's Northeast and Kolanowski, those are not regulation-sized gyms either, and parents cannot sit around the edges. So you're saying these gyms are similar to that?
No, these gyms are actually larger than... These gyms are actually slightly larger than what the state will allow for elementary schools, and there will be a border around the court that will allow for some seating.
So Parks and Rec will lose they'll gain 1 gym up at the middle school? Is that for Parks and Rec to also use? Because they...
No, Parks and Recs can use these gyms as well.
But they're not
And they will.
regulation size, and parents won't be able to sit around the edge?
as Bob had mentioned, these are actually larger than the state's space standard typically expects to see for an elementary level program. Again, we've got to strip this all down to why are we here? We're here to build elementary schools. The fact that you've got other buildings that are programmed for other uses currently as middle schools that have different size resources needs to be compared to the new program, and the state's space standard, which looks at the square footage of the program in the building entirely, is driven by the number of students and the grade range of the students. If this were a 604 student middle school, the state's space standard would allow you more square footage for the overall building. If we build beyond the space standard for an elementary school of this capacity, the state gives you 0% reimbursement for that excess square footage. And it's not just the construction cost, but it's for that incremental percentage of furniture and fees and site work, and all of those things get pinched by the percentage that you're over the space standard. So that has been again, another constraint, both the location of the existing buildings and the allowance for eligible square footage.
So one of the things that I'd like you guys all to understand is if we could build a bigger gym, we would do it. The problem is that for an elementary school of this size, the state will reimburse us for X square feet. The minute we go over that, we're paying for it. And as the chair, I'm not going to go over budget.
So you're saying the
And-
school as a whole?
Absolutely.
The whole school?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
to squeeze you're squeezing the gym a little bit, is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is if we could build a bigger gym, we would. But in order to do that, you guys would have to tell us, we'll go out and find the taxpayer money to do it with. What you've asked me to do is to say, we funded a referendum, build us a school for X number of students that fits the educational specs and that the state will give us the largest reimbursement for. Get the most for your money. This is what we're trying to do here.
Do you have further questions?
Again, as I mentioned before, the actual square footage of these two gymnasiums is based on a middle school sized gym, not an elementary school sized gym. So we're already upsizing the gym from what the space standard would typically expect to see in an elementary environment. So we pushed the envelope as far as we could while staying within the overall square footage allocation that the state allows.
I'm not sure if I actually heard the answer, though. Will parents be able to sit around the edges?
As Bob mentioned, there are margins around the court that could be used for seating, but there are no grandstands.
Is the margin the same as, say, the Kolanowski School?
No, it'll be more like what you see at Westside and Cutler currently.
All right. Just a few more questions. So when you're building the finishing and the facade, there's nothing that's looking as though it's going to be major maintenance done long term, as in the north, like I believe Northeast Academy had the.
No
beams.
exposed wood, if that's what you're thinking about.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And the full security. It's at the best practices now, right? That's going to go into these schools, the security systems.
Yes, all three projects are required to respond to the school safety infrastructure guidelines of the state and conform with the safety plan that was developed by the Board of Ed. There's a set of guidelines that the state has published, but each board statewide picks and chooses how they're going to meet those goals and comes up with their plan, which they have to articulate back through the Office of Emergency Management and put it on the record with the state. So the district has done that, and the designers have been following those decisions the town, the Board of Ed has made for all three schools.
And the windows, are they, I had seen a picture, are they narrow windows? Or do they have some kind of wood in the middle of them to shield sunlight, or?
There are, where we have exposures that would get sun glare from, say, the east and west, there are vertical shade fins to try to interrupt that so that it softens the light and doesn't glare directly into the classrooms. So those are solar control fins. They are, as you see, these vertical elements between the windows.
All right, thank you, I'm all set now. Sorry to ask so many questions.
No, it's great.
We have Counselor Baumgartner.
The number of meetings that we've had that had nobody at them, it's fun to have people that actually want to know.
Oh,
That's not what you said the other night when like 20 of us showed up. So we have Counselor Baumgartner and then Counselor Heed.
What sources of energy will these buildings derive the majority of their power from?
Andre,
I'm
Counselor
sorry.
Baumgartner, could you use the mic, please?
Yeah. What sources of energy will these buildings derive their power from? I understand that the Westside Middle School building, which will ultimately become the elementary school, can accommodate solar panels. So,
All three buildings have the ability to accommodate some solar panels, and there's additional research being done on just how much and where. It's not a significant percentage of the power usage of the building from an electrical standpoint, but each building has the potential of contributing something through PV panels. The primary sources of energy are, of course, utility electric, and the heating systems will be powered by natural gas.
and what sensitivities in the case of Westside, the Westside Elementary School building, what sensitivities were given to Baker's Cove? Obviously, you have the retention pond just behind the school, but I think in the long term there is a plan to extend a walkway going from a walkway that commences at Thomas Road and then will end ultimately on Pequannock Road, and that could also open up the opportunity for kind of educational exploration with the
And
elementary school
any
children as
future
well.
plans for hiking trails has not been something that we've been made aware of. But as we mentioned, we're not, other than the clearing of the site large enough to accommodate the required detention pond, we're not doing any other disruption to the state, to the site to change it from its existing state.
And lastly, I understand, right now these the school projects do not have a project labor agreement. So has there been kind of any consideration from the building school committee and the folks who in Arcadis on kind of ensuring that local people will be hired on these contracts when they go out to bid?
The town council has decided to implement certain employment requirements for resident labor, for minority labor, and for minority and women, and for military veterans. And so each construction project will be measured against those goals.
Right.
And that's already in process at the middle school.
Thank you.
Councilor Ortiz.
Hi. Concerning the security of entrance in these two schools, what do we have in place?
Here we go. From a visitor security standpoint, we come into a locked vestibule area. They'll need to get buzzed in to the outside doors. That will then let them be buzzed in to the main office area. And once they check in and are badged, then they'll be allowed to pass into the school itself. All of the other doors, after arrival time, all entrances will be locked. At arrival time, only these two areas, which will be monitored, will be open. So all your peripheral emergency exits will be locked at all times. Again, service area here, there'll be some provisions to buzz in for deliveries and the like. So it is each of the buildings is a secure building, and there is that checkpoint Charlie at the front office for all visitors. Beyond that, the other features that the Board of Ed has identified, which I can't articulate off the top of my head, but their entire security plan as to how the district wants the building to run has been provided to the architects and also is shared with the state as we seek our incremental approvals.
Right, we can talk about the basic security, which he did. We're not going to get into the details of specific security requirements that come out of the plan that the Board of Education delineates, and that's a matter of safety for the kids.
Yes. I also see that we're over our time allotment for the next meeting to start, so if I may proceed on to a quick update on the middle school.
We had one more question, please.
Okay.
Counselor Heed?
Counselor Ortiz got my question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So as Bob mentioned, we have recently had the topping off party. The last piece of steel was raised at the middle school on Friday. Just to recap, and there has been some discussion in the community that tells me that there's still some confusion as to how our points of access work for the middle school. We will have 2 drives entering the property. One here through Fitch, which you approach off of Groton Long Point Road, the existing Fitch entry driveway, and then peel off to the right, and there's a new drive that brings in. This is our bus loop through the middle school. And then the primary parent drop-off area will come in from Route 1 into the El Grasso entry road, for which we have an easement from the state of Connecticut to connect to our driveway, which will lead up the hill, and to an area at the lower level of the school, which will allow parent drop-off at the curb, and then they can exit out to Route 1. There are a couple of cuts through the trees that are conspicuous at this point. You'll see one here opposite, pretty close to or closer to the church than the other, which is a utility corridor where we're bringing certain utilities in from Route 1, but that will also be a pedestrian walk that was requested by the planning department. So that's one of the gaps of the trees that you see. There's another one further down the hill, which has been cleared to allow our sewer line to go. You may have noticed some construction happening down here near the park. That will be the installation of our sanitary sewer that will then continue up Route 1 and then cross into the site at a point, a third or halfway up the hill. So there's a somewhat larger break in the trees down here, but that's just to allow that construction to happen. And then there will be new trees that will be installed later in the project to add some screening from the street.
I'd like to note at the top of the drawing here on the right, you're picking up the softball field, a multi-purpose field, and what we're thinking is going to end up being a synthetic turf field as well. So those are in addition to what's there already.
We're more than thinking, we already bought it. Here are a few photographs from around the project. This is from that lower level, near where I said the parent drop-off will be at the lower level of the site. At the grade level of the academic building, we have 4 floors of academics here at the middle school, and the main entrance and main office areas are at that lower level, so our visitor parking will be down at that parking area as well. As we mentioned, up at the upper level, because we have 2 grade floors here, again, the bottom of the academic wing, and up at the gym and library wing as well, and there'll be additional parking there for events as well as teacher parking. This is a shot looking basically with your back to El Grasso, looking across what will someday be a parking lot at the academic building. You can see the steel is up. We have slabs poured on all floors, and we've got our roof screening for our mechanical equipment that's been framed. Looking from the end of the academic building, this piece of the building faces Route 1. You could see that the stud framing to enclose the exterior is proceeding. We've got our spray-on fireproofing to protect our steel that's proceeding, and we're already starting to sheathe the building. This is a view on that lower level again to the right of where the other picture was taken. This is the element that will become our art classrooms in the front in this lower story, and then the higher framed area is our cafeteria. These monitor roofs on the cafeteria have the opening pointing north, so we'll have some north light coming into the cafeteria areas, and those areas are also some of the square footage of roof that is able to accommodate solar panels. This is a picture from the approach from Fitch coming into what will be our bus loop up at the upper level. This area here, you see the cafeteria roof with the monitors beyond. This will be library in here. The gym framing was just starting to go up when this picture was taken. And as you know from last Friday's ceremony, that has extended upwards and the last steel has been installed. This picture shows the area between the 2 wings of the building, where we have the academic building on the right and what now is a fully framed gymnasium structure would be occurring to our left. And a shot through the main thoroughfare down the first floor of the academic building to give you an idea that folks are working fast and furious. We've got considerable workforce here working on every area that is accessible at the time, and now that the steel is up, we can proceed with additional floor slabs and make other areas of the building available for interior construction. Again, a couple of shots from the beam raising on Friday. We did have a good turnout with a number of folks being interested in signing the last piece of steel for posterity. Progress is on schedule. I dare say maybe just a smidge ahead of schedule, but we don't want to jinx anything yet. We're still working diligently at a 6-day-a-week pace that we bought. All trades are working 6 days a week in order to meet our obligation of students in seats for the fall 2020 school year. Are there any questions about the middle school?
Councilor Franco had one more question.
Actually, I have two. Did you speak to the athletic director when you did a lot of these, the fields, by any chance? Get his advisement?
Yeah, all district administrators were pulled in at the appropriate level.
So the athletic director was just, this was discussed with him, or were they gym teachers from middle schools?
I don't remember the names of everyone that the architects had met with, but I know that the request went out to the administration to provide the appropriate person. So I would trust that the superintendent's office did just that.
So you're going to have the fields up there. It would have been requested that maybe some piping be run out from the school up to where the soccer field, softball fields are. So if in the future they wanted to put lights up, the pipe would already be there. Is that possible?
We looked at that request, and it would be considered a piece of the project that was not eligible for reimbursement.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side of that, we have power being run to supply the construction trailers that comes down that property line. And it's an option that power line that's quote-unquote temporary could turn out to be a permanent source of power independent of the school, so that it would have its own meter and it would be able to be monitored directly as a recreational amenity rather than powering it through the school itself. So that we looked at that, and when the construction manager showed us their logistics plan as to where that trailer area was going to be set up, we realized that could be a resource that could be left in place for future use.
Okay, so when would it be decided if it's going to be left in place? Who would decide that?
Before fall of next year, before next summer, we would need to know whether there's an appetite for providing something down the road, and then it's a matter of just not removing it. Having a contractor who owns the removal credit back the cost of removal.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Aubry.
I'm just wondering how much is, sorry. I always figure people can hear me. I'm just wondering, as far as the lighting in the schools, there was quite a good article just recently in the paper about some of the schools that are being built, that the lighting is done to save quite a bit of money, going dim, going off automatically, and et cetera. And I'm wondering how much of that we may see in these new schools.
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
in various forms, all of those features are being employed. First of all, the majority, if not all of the lighting has transitioned over to LEDs.
Mm-hmm.
The high performance building standards, again, a state requirement that we either meet the state's high performance guidelines or LEED Silver as our sustainability goal. Those requirements tell you that you need a certain or you're only afforded a certain energy diet for the building. So the engineers are designing all the features of the building to those requirements. So lighting control, whether it be motion sensors, whether it be daylight harvesting, where the windows closest to the window, the lighting closest to the window gets dimmed or turned off, while the lighting fixtures closer to the interior of the building stay on in order to balance off and utilize the daylight. Those are all features that are considered by the design team in the design of each of these projects.
That's great.
Councilor Heed, I think you have the last question.
The entrance for the buses, it appears to go through a parking lot in the Fitch area, like the Fitch parking lot. Is that correct?
Yeah, we will use the existing Fitch driveway, and as we get in the vicinity of the service area for Fitch, which is at this end of the building, we'll be reconfiguring this parking area and have a drive that connects to the Fitch main drive that then becomes the approach to the middle school. And yes, the buses will loop around this parking area, drop off at the curb, and then exit.
So there will be some minor changes to that corner, and that's part of
So
this.
it'd be safer.
Yes. Well,
Councilor Ortiz?
One last question. How many students will attend the school? The capacity of the whole building?
oh, no, now you're putting me to the test. Pardon? Rick says 937. I was going to say 1,000, but
Thank you.
again, when we look at the total number of teaching spaces versus the enrollment, because not all rooms that potentially could be used as homerooms are designated as homerooms. I'm a former school administrator, so I know some of the tricks between increasing the student count per room and utilizing those additional teaching spaces in different ways. You can provide surge capacity without having to add to the building. And on this particular building, because we have the embarrassment of riches of a large site, there is an opportunity to extend the academic wing in this area in order to take care of excess capacity beyond that.
Thank you.
If I could also add to that, just one of the things that we've had the architects do with all three of these schools, but this one especially, is to make sure that the spaces that are designed for teaching are designed in a way that allows them to flex to do other things. So you'll see rooms that may say movement studio, but could be used for things like dance or so we've asked them to be make them as multifunctional as possible, so that there's no such thing as a history room or a foreign language room type of thing. And as Jack said, we designed this school specifically so that we can add to the wing at the end if we had to at some point in the future.
Are there any additional questions from the council? Okay, that concludes our presentation
Thank you.
for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Butkus. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you all for
LaFrance.
coming out. I will take a motion for adjournment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned.
Town council, motion to adjourn. Moved by Parker, seconded by Baumgartner. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. We are at 8 councilors. Councilor Aubry was here. We are adjourned at 7:52. Thank you, Mayor Hedrick and council, for having us down here. Next time in our place.